Hello health champions. Welcome to the Wellness Code. Today we're going to talk about the top 10 most dangerous foods that you never want to eat, and we're going to do this in reverse order from least bad to most bad. And number 10 is refined grains. And here we have things like white bread, white flour, white rice, etc. We also have pasta, which some people think of as more healthy, and you could argue it's slightly more healthy, but we're going to talk about where it really fits. So white bread has a glycemic index of 75, and that's a measurement of how quickly your blood sugar rises after you eat a certain food, and glucose, pure glucose, is the reference at a 100. So white bread is considered high glycemic index because it raises your blood sugar very, very quickly, and white rice is right there with it. But when we look at pasta now, that is 55, and on the official tables of glycemic index, that's considered low. And I put a question mark on that because we're going to talk a little bit about it. What is it low compared to? And if we look at something like pure table sugar, that only has a glycemic index of 65. So there, pasta would seem to be lower because sugar is lower than white bread, for example. But we have to understand how everything compares. What is it in relationship to? So when we look at the standard scale of low, medium, and high glycemic index, traditionally everything under 55 is considered low glycemic index, and everything between 55 and 70 is considered medium, and everything above 70 is considered high glycemic index. But here's the thing, there are only carbohydrate foods on that standard glycemic index scale. So when you look up a list of glycemic index foods, they only pretty much have carbohydrate and starchy foods on there because, as a culture, the world has more and more moved to where that is the foundation. That's what we eat the most of, and we're told, in fact, to eat 250 to 300 grams of carbohydrate as if that should be the foundation of our food. But I would like to introduce another scale for glycemic index, which I call real. And the reason I call that is that everything below 20 is what I think low glycemic index should be. And if you don't just look at the starchy and the bread and the carbohydrate foods but you look at whole foods, which I believe is what we should eat the most of, namely beef, fish, chicken, we should have nuts and seeds. We should have non-starchy vegetables and leafy greens in abundance, and every single one of those foods fall in the below 20 range. And then you have between 20 and 40. We could have a few tubers like rutabaga and celery root. And those are things that you could eat occasionally, but they're still not as bad as the starchy food that we're told should be the foundation. And then as an exception, now you could occasionally have some sweet potato or some potato or even some white rice or some beans or something like that, but that should be the exception. If we eat whole food, low starchy vegetables, and leafy for the most part, then almost everything, like 90% of what we eat, is going to fall in the below 20. So when we look at these numbers, we should put it in perspective and realize that these are foods that have created the greatest metabolic epidemic we have ever seen. Number 9 is fruit juices. So let's talk about a few different things. There is fresh fruit, which I think that you could have in moderation and seasonally, and if you happen to live on a tropical island and your ancestors have been there for a few hundred years, then you're probably also adapted to some mango and some pineapple on more months out of the year, as long as you don't eat sugar and processed foods in addition to these things. But when we talk about pasteurized fruit juice, which is something completely different, then that is something that you probably want to avoid. Most of the live things and the enzymes and the energy that you find in fresh fruit has not survived that pasteurization. Plus, if you're talking about fruit juice versus fresh fruit, you're basically just getting the sugar more concentrated. So it's easier to consume more sugar. If you're going to do juice occasionally, I would suggest doing it fresh squeeze. And this is also not something that you should do on a regular basis, especially if you're insulin resistant. But if you wanted to have juice that you squeeze yourself from a grapefruit or an orange, then do that very, very occasionally. But that would be more like on birthdays and holidays and things like that, maybe once a month, but don't turn it into a daily thing. So why am I calling these foods dangerous? Some people who clicked on this video might think that they would see some gory stuff, like you take a bite of this mushroom, and you die, or something like that. But I want to talk about the things that actually kill people on planet Earth today. The top killer diseases, which is heart disease, COVID-19 in 2021. It is no longer one of the greatest killers, but I put that here for a reason. We're going to put that into context. Then we have cancer, we have stroke, we have COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, we have respiratory infection, dementia, we have type 2 diabetes, and then kidney disease and liver disease. These are the diseases that kill more people than anything else on planet Earth. So when I talk about the most dangerous foods, I'm talking about the types of food and the types of lifestyle that predispose you to these diseases, where there is a causal connection between what you eat and these diseases. And I'm going to give you a little graphic just to help make a point that for heart disease, for example, I feel, based on what I know and I've seen and heard and read, that this red area, somewhere around 90% of heart disease, is probably caused by foods that cause inflammation and that cause insulin resistance and metabolic disease. And this is not based on some specific research or anything. I'm going to give you a little graphic for each one, and it's just approximately how I feel about it, so don't take it too specifically. But I'm just trying to make a point that the most dangerous foods are the ones that cause the vast majority of these diseases. So as we go down the list, COVID-19 basically did not kill anybody who was metabolically healthy. And on the few occasions that they said, well, look at this one, he was healthy, and he died, well, they probably weren't as healthy as they thought. When we look at cancer, we look at stroke, we look at COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. That is mostly caused by smoking, so that's a little bit less. Then we have respiratory infections, again, that's an infection, the pathogen is the primary cause, but metabolic disease is an aggravating factor. And then we have dementia, type 2 diabetes, kidney disease, and liver disease. The vast majority of the cases are caused by these metabolic problems. And the only other really significant factor would be smoking for lung disease and also for cancer. But other than that, the vast majority of these diseases are caused by our modern lifestyle and our tendency to eat sugar and ultra-processed foods. Number 8 is fried food. And here we have things like French fries and potato chips, but even other things that we fry, like shrimp or chicken or just about anything else, is going to be high starch. We're going to use potato flour or white flour or some kind of starch to soak up all that oil that we're frying it with. And the oils we use for frying, for the most part, are not going to be the healthy oils. They're going to be really bad and unhealthy, such as seed oils and soybean oil and sometimes corn oil. And here we start off with an excess of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. We're going to shift our inflammatory responses in the body toward pro-inflammatory. But in addition to that, these oils are extremely harshly processed. We make them with high heat and high pressure and lots of chemicals. So even if some of these seeds were okay as a food to start with, by the time we make oil from it, we have changed the product so much it is not healthy anymore.